Greetings. My name is Luis. I am an alcoholic. I have a sobriety date of May the 7th of 2020. Welcome everyone to today's Threads of Recovery workshop. I've stated that I am an alcoholic. Do we have any other alcoholics in the meeting today? Wave, smile. Acknowledging God's presence with a moment of silence, I'll follow that with the set-aside prayer. Lord, help me set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about my fellows, everything I think I know about my own recovery, for a much needed new experience in you, myself, and my fellows, and a new experience in my recovery. Help me to see the truth. Amen. 1058 Threads of Recovery continues to offer 3 days of virtual workshops a week. To be included in our weekly emails, send your request to threads1058@gmail.com. This will keep you up to date on our workshops. Our group follows the 12 traditions. We stick to our singleness of purpose. We ask that everyone refrain from profanity when sharing an activity that may distract our speaker or others during the meeting. Please turn your camera on if at all possible. We love to see your smiling face. The 7th tradition states that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. The contributions help to cover the group's expenses, but the 7th tradition is more than simply paying rent and other group expenses. It is both a privilege and a responsibility of individual groups and members to ensure that our organization at every level remains forever self-supporting and free of outside influences that might divert us from our primary purpose. The monetary amount of each contribution is secondary to the spiritual connection that joins us in unity with AA groups around the world. 7 tradition contributions can be made using Venmo and by mailing it. Details are in the chat. This is an open meeting. Open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery from alcoholism. Non-alcoholics are welcome to attend open meetings as observers. And now it is with great pleasure to introduce someone that's going to lead us through the 12 steps in the Big Book in a new series, Sponsorship in Working with Others. And with that, Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Luis. My name is Bill. I am an alcoholic, and happy birthday to, was it Bridget?
Correct, 48 years.
It's a good beginning, I'll tell you that. Hey, happy birthday. Yay. Well, Luis let the secret out. Today is day 1 of a 13-session series on sponsorship. So those of you that don't think you need to help, you can leave now. Oh, wait, some of you may just be curious. You may not be sure whether. Thank you, Hermione. Hermione got it right away. Jane is shocked that I would say it. It's okay, Jane. Stay with me. Kathy, good to have you in the house. Meeting's always stronger when we got Kathy here. She holds us accountable. Don't you, Kath? We're going to talk about sponsorship as it is presented in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And before I say anything more, I told you I'm an alcoholic. I do have a sobriety date, and it's March 18th, 1981. That was not my first sobriety date, but it is my current, and I hope it stays that way. I didn't get the part about don't take the first drink for a while. I'm one of these, I guess you could look back and say I was kind of into self-help. I didn't see it that way, but I figured I could read the book, go to meetings, learn to stop the problem, and not stop drinking. I did not want to give up the sense of ease and comfort that the big book describes it in the doctor's opinion. I did not want to give up the sense of ease and comfort that came with those first 2 or 3 drinks. I thought I'd go to AA, and I look back on it now and realize it would be cheating, wouldn't it? To try to get the benefit of the program without learning to stop starting, without learning to stop taking the first drink. And so March 18th, 1981 is my current and hopefully continuing sobriety date. I became a big fan of the big book when I was 3 years sober. We moved to Little Rock. Tina and I had gotten married. We moved to Little Rock from Kansas City, where I had 2 really good years of sponsorship with my first sponsor, Aaron. Moved to Little Rock. My second sponsor was a man named Robert. And Robert was the guy that went around taping workshops and conferences and conventions. And we spent a lot of time, Robert and I, because I would help him tape, record, go to Joe and Charlie Big Book studies. And that's when I got to know Joe and Charlie really well and got to spend a lot of time, particularly with Joe, in the Monday night Chalk Talk, the step study at the Wall Street Club in Little Rock. And for a while, I was a big book thumper. I need to make that confession up front. I try to remember to do this at least once or twice every workshop series. I will admit I was a big book thumper for years. Now, you know what a big book thumper is? A big book thumper is not typically complimentary. It is not a complimentary term. When people say, oh, he's a big book thumper, it's not really very complimentary, because a big book thumper is someone who takes what they think they know about the book and tries to cram it down your throat. I know that's shocking. Thank you, Scott. They try to take what they think they know about the big book and try to cram it down your throat. And unfortunately, or not, I was that guy for several years. Somehow, the last 10 or 15 years, God has helped me, and I give God the credit. I don't think I would have done this on my own. Come to think of it, I do very few good things on my own without God's help. I became a big book enthusiast. And the difference to me between a big book thumper and a big book enthusiast is I just want to share my enthusiasm and my gratitude for what the big book has done for me, with me, through me, in me, with you. I just want to share my enthusiasm with you. I am not an authority on the big book. I am an enthusiast for the big book. And I hope, once again, as I've said in the 12-step studies we've done before this, I hope to share some of my enthusiasm with you. There are some people here with really good, solid, long-term recovery, and I'm grateful so many of you continue to spend time with us on Monday, because no matter how long we've been around here, we come to realize, boy, there's still more to learn in the big book. God has more to disclose to us in the big book. And so I hope to encourage you to stay with us on this particular series. We are going to be talking about sponsorship as it is described, maybe not always spelled out. The word sponsorship isn't used too much at all in the big book. And there's a couple of reasons for that I'll touch on. Reasons, I think. But the practice, the experience, the relationship of sponsorship runs throughout the big book, from the very beginning of the book all the way through the stories in the second half of the book. So sponsorship, working with others, that's the title of chapter 7. And I would call this a stewardship of hope. Yes, write that down. Sponsorship, working with others, a stewardship of hope. And I will explain that very briefly, and I'm sure we'll touch on it again in the sessions ahead. What is a steward? A steward is someone who has been giving something valuable to use, to develop, to care for, and to share with others. By definition, stewardship is not selfish. the whole notion, particularly of spiritual stewardship, the notion of spiritual stewardship is the furthest thing away from selfish. It may be self-enlightened in the sense that we say in recovery, you have to give it away to keep it. That's not selfish, that's self-enlightened. So what do we have in sponsorship but a stewardship of hope? We'll see how that unfolds in step one, and we will certainly see how the stewardship of hope as a sponsor. We have given this precious gift that we have the opportunity to share, to help other people with their spiritual awakening, with their spiritual experiences. We are indeed involved in the stewardship of hope called sponsorship. That may sound a little corny to some of you. That may sound a little airy-fairy. That may sound a little highfalutin, maybe too much air in the balloon. That's okay. Stay tuned. We'll get grounded pretty quick, won't we, Kathy? See there? Well, I only got one thumbs up. It's a beginning. It's a good beginning. This 12-step study will guide us to work the 12 steps in the big book using chapter 7 citations as a guide to each of the steps. Chapter 7 is the working with others chapter that follows step 11. And I'll give you an example. Today we're going to talk about step 1. And the line we're going to use to kind of trigger that discussion of step 1 on the first pages of the book is a line on page 92 in the chapter 7. A line on page 92 that includes the mental twist that precedes the first drink. That's our trigger for step 1 today. A couple things to remember. The very first line of the big book, forward to the first edition. The more than 100 men and women who were seemingly hopeless that found a way up and out. The more than 100 men and women who gave us a 12-step spiritual recovery program in Alcoholics Anonymous admit two very important things to us. First thing they did, first sentence in the book, we admit we're seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's a bottom. That's a bottom. No matter how much money you have or don't have, no matter houses you have or don't have, cars you have, no matter how many wives you have or used to have, no matter how many kids, jobs, wristwatches, no matter how much money you got in the bank, whether your skin has turned yellow like mine had in 1981, the bottom is when the individual man or woman reaches the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And that's one thing we all share. Because until we get that desperate, AA just doesn't sound like a good idea. So the first thing they admitted are a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's on page XIII of the 4th edition. The second thing they admit, way back on page 164, we realize we know only a little. Well, think about that for a minute. If you just read those two sentences, the beginning of the book, we're a hopeless lot. We get all the way to 164, we realize we know only a little. You look at that book and you say, what the hell they been doing? Not much seems to go on here. And I think our fellowship sometimes forgets that. We forget that we were seemingly hopeless. I hear people all the time saying, I don't want to hear so much drunkalogue. I want to hear about recovery. Well, if we don't continue to explain the drunkalogue to the newcomer, how are they going to relate to us in the first place? They're not going to stick around for the spiritual awakening. I think the fellowship often forgets that we were seemingly hopeless. I think the fellowship also likes to forget we realize we know only a little. Truth is, now watch this carefully, I hope you're sitting down, we still know only a little. Compared to everything I now understand there is to know, I realize I know only a little. But we're no longer hopeless. We know that. We know enough else to use our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, as the primary source of guidance in how to recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. How do we do that? With a spiritual awakening. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we may know only a little, but we know enough to use the 12 steps to recover from seemingly hopeless in what we call a spiritual awakening. The objective of this particular 12-step study is to help us improve how we sponsor a person in working the 12 steps and become willing to let the 12 steps work us, which is what really happens here, as presented in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. That may sound obvious, but there's a lot of sponsorship going on that doesn't have much to do with the book Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of freestyle going on out here, a lot of improvisation, not all of which is bad. However, I have found, and believe me, I've done everything the big book says don't do, and I've not done what the big book said to do over the years enough to know that trying to do it the big book way is really the safe course. And so we're going to, like I said, use a little piece here, chapter 7 this week, a little piece next week from chapter 7, and each step of the way we're going to see how chapter 7 triggers activity that takes us back through the book in steps 1 through 11, and then ultimately step 12. People say all the time, this word sponsorship doesn't even show up in chapter 7. Maybe, but the practice, the activity of sponsorship is a thread of recovery, thank you very much, on every page of chapter 7. This is really, really important. Sponsorship is vital. It's the lifeblood. It's the breath of air. Sponsorship is vital to help a new person or one of us who's been around a while continue to deal with the spiritual mystery that is Alcoholics Anonymous. We realize we know only a little because so much of it's a mystery. We can tell what to do. We can tell what happens when we do. We can't always explain how did this lead to that? We try all the time, all these word pictures, all these metaphors. I'm sure I'll use some in the next 45 minutes. I'm helpless in the face of my metaphors. It's a mystery. It's okay because we're living in the mystery. We don't have to solve the mystery to experience the mystery. This is a good mystery. It's not a threatening mystery. Sponsorship is vital in the spiritual mystery of Alcoholics Anonymous because we learn what to do that works. We learn what not to do that doesn't work. We learn that sponsorship works without ever fully understanding how it works. Let me give you an example. In Bill's story, he recites how his old drinking buddy, his bestest, hardest core drinking buddy, Ebby T, comes to visit him. Look at page 8 in Bill's story. This is page 8 in all 4 editions of the big book. And by the way, this story Bill is going to tell, he compresses more than one visit into what sounds like 1 or 2, but that's not the point. It is a story. If I told you everything that happened since I got sober in 81, we wouldn't get done here in an hour, would we? Our stories deal with compression. But even with compression, even Bill compresses all the details of the many conversations he had during 1934 with Ebby T. It still takes up 1/3 of Bill's story. His visit with Ebby takes up an entire third of his story. And this is a sponsorship example. Look at page 8. The very bottom line, the cheery voice Ebby was full of cheer. I don't know that Bill knew the significance of hearing a cheery voice on the phone in the middle of his drunken stupor. And then Bill says on page 9, when Ebby shows up at the door, in italics, Bill says, he was sober. Bill couldn't imagine his old drinking buddy showing up at all. He thought he was in prison or buried. He shows up, and look at how he describes it. He was fresh-skinned and glowing. Son of a gun was healthy. Bill says something about his eyes. Remember when you got to AA, if you were like me, you weren't looking anybody in the eye. I'd look up and they were looking me in the eye, and I'd look away real quick. I wouldn't look. Something about Ebby's eyes. He was looking straight at Bill. I'll tell you what he was doing. Bill says on page 9, in fact, Marcus, you can read for us. I want Marcus to read this.
I am indeed. Thanks, Bill. Where am I
Marcus.
reading from?
All right. In the middle of page 9, Bill says, I pushed a drink across the table. Read from there to the very top of page 10, the first 2 lines on page 10.
Okay. I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply but smilingly, he said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They told of a simple religious idea and a practical programme of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He'd come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly, I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. Thank you for letting me read.
Thank you, sir. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He did no ranting. He had simply come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. He was not going to force it down his throat. And then the declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself, Bill says on page 11. Bill's remembering this when he's writing this chapter 4 years later. He's writing this chapter in the spring. He's writing his story in the spring, April and May of 1938. He's remembering what happened during the spring and fall of 1934. And he's talked about it, and Ebby's talked about it a lot since then. But it's very important for us to understand. Bill remembers something about Ebby's visits in those days when Bill was still drinking. Wasn't ready to quit yet. God had done for him what he could not do for himself. We're going to remember that time and time again in our sponsorship relationship. We are not God in their life. And you say, well, yeah, I know that. Stay tuned. Easy to forget. And then on page 12, in italics, the bell rings that we've been ringing ever since. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Ebby didn't tell Bill he had to believe the way Ebby did. He opened the door to a new hope. Why don't you choose your own? It's a beginning. On page 13, my schoolmate visited me in the hospital. See, Bill drank some more. Ebby didn't walk away. Ebby didn't sit there going harumph. When he suffers enough, he'll call me. I'm not going to. Ebby went back to see him in the hospital. We're going to see that time and again in sponsorship. And then he says on page 13, we made a list of people. Notice the we. Ebby helped him with his 4-step. Ebby helped him with his fifth, sixth, seventh, and 8th step. Ebby helped him prepare for his 9th step. He didn't just leave him alone dangling out in the wind like a sparrow kicked out of the nest. And then on page 13, he says, my friend promised. Here's the stewardship of hope. Here's the stewardship of hope, born in visits from Ebby with Bill in 1934. My friend promised, when these things were done, what things? What became the 12 steps? When these things were done is what became the 12 steps. On page 13, my friend promised when these things were done, I would enter into a new relationship with my Creator. This is the beginning of the stewardship of hope, and it's the beginning, coincidentally, of the spiritual awakening. That's a sponsorship example. You don't need the word to see the practice, okay? Step 1, Hal says, thank God the introduction's over. Let's get into step 1. I understand, Al. I'm with you. Page 59, summary of the first 11 steps. Page 59, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. How does the big book cover that? Page 1 through 60, and I mean Roman 1, not Arabic 1. The big book begins way back at the table of contents. Everything in the big book up to page 60 is about step 1 and 2. It's the information we need to realize our problem and realize how much help we need from a power greater than ourselves. So the summary on page 59, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, is a summary of what we learned in the first 60 pages of the big book. I didn't know that at first. I thought you could work the step off page 59. I had to learn the hard way. It doesn't stick, doesn't sink in. So the what and the how, right? The what and the how of sponsorship in step 1. If you have the outline, you've already got these 1, 2, 3 written in front of you. If you don't have the outline, if you don't have the handout, I really ask you to write these down. This is my experience. It's not necessarily big book sanctioned. I don't think it violates the big book, but what is the what and the how? If I'm going to sponsor somebody, what's my responsibility? What am I trying to do? Very simple. In step 1. In step 1. As a sponsor, I'm a guide. I'm not a controller. I'm not a priest. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm definitely not a marriage counselor, a lawyer, doctor, Indian chief. I'm a guide because I've been down the trail and I'm going to help you go down the trail, even though your trail is not going to be identical to mine, because no two spiritual awakenings are exactly alike. But I can guide you to get on the path of your spiritual awakening in step 1. I can guide you to get on the path of your spiritual awakening in step 1 if I keep 3 things in mind. Help the alcoholic understand, whether they like it or not, whether they feel good about it or not, whether they feel comfortable with it or not is beside the point. Help them understand. Like Rick said in the 10 o'clock this morning, here's some self-honesty at a very healthy level. The alcoholic has to look in the mirror like I finally had to do and say, Bill, I have a physical allergy. Didn't ask for it. Didn't even know I had it till after I'd drunk for a long time. I have a physical allergy to alcohol that cannot be reduced or removed. The first 60 pages of the big book help us convince the alcoholic of that simple fact. The doctor's opinion is mostly about the physical allergy. Our job as a sponsor is to help them identify, relate. How about admit the truth? I have a physical allergy to alcohol that will never be reduced or removed. Not drinking doesn't make the allergy go away. Number 2, help the alcoholic come to a point they can look in the mirror and say, I am powerless to stop starting. I was not powerless to stop. I stopped almost every day when I woke up with an excruciating headache. How can you sweat and be dry at the same time? I was sweating and dry as a bone. How do you do that? It's called hangover. Yeah, you're laughing now, Debbie G. You weren't laughing those days. I quit. That's it. I can't believe I did it again last night. I'm never going to go through this again, Marcus. I quit. I did that maybe, I don't know, 8,000, 9,000 times. I quit a lot until about 4 or 5 o'clock. Well, it wasn't that bad. Luis, I overreacted. I blew this out of proportion. Maybe just a couple. How about this? The hair of the dog that bit me. Anybody remember that one? Oh, yeah. If that weren't just a metaphor, I'd have killed a lot of dogs, I'll tell you that. The hair of the dog, my eye. I have to be able to look. My sponsor helped me look in the mirror in Kansas City during the spring of 1981 and say, I'm powerless to stop starting to drink on my own, regardless of how strong my self-will, regardless of how much self-knowledge I have, regardless of how great my desire is. I'm powerless to stop starting on my own. And what's the third thing the sponsor can help me do? My life has become unmanageable, whatever that means. More desperate, more hopeless. As long as I live in defiance about points 1 and 2, as long as I live in denial and delusion that I don't have a physical allergy, or I can quit anytime I want to, I just don't want to. And look at what page 92 says in Working with Others. Teresa, are you able to unmute, dear heart? Teresa?
Yes, Bill. Are
Yep.
we on 92, you
Look
said?
at page 92 and read, beginning with the second line, give him an account. Read the rest of that paragraph for us.
Yes, Bill. Teresa, blessed alcoholic. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of the spree. We suggest you do this as we have done it in the chapter on alcoholism. If he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. The mental twist which overcomes stop starting. And we show him that by sharing our own experience. See, that's why anybody can be a sponsor that has had a few months of not drinking and a little bit of self-confidence enough to control your own words. We all know how we struggled not to stop, but to stop starting. And right here on page 92 is our trigger line for step 1. It doesn't say tell him what he needs to do. Look at what Teresa just said. Give him an account of the struggles that made you stop. and the struggles you made to stop. I just read that both ways, didn't I? And he says, in other words, we suggest you use the book. In the chapter on alcoholism, he's referring to chapter 3, more about alcoholism. It's okay to use chapter 2 as well. It's not cheating to use 2 and 3. That's what they're there for, to help us understand alcoholism. Now, if he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. Bill was struck with an attack of optimism here. That isn't the at once isn't necessarily true. It sure wasn't at once with me. 3 months just to don't take the first drink down. I'm a quick study and a slow learner, I'll tell you. Look at the first sentence. Tell him how baffled you were. Look at that. Top of page 92. Look at that. Admit it. Oh, yeah, I'm working with a newcomer, and I told him how quick I was to get this thing. I didn't have any trouble at all. I drank for 21 years, never had a trouble till the last couple days. No, I was never baffled. You're cuckoo, dude. Get real. Tell him how baffled you were. This is why our past is our greatest asset. If nothing else, we can help someone else with a similar past get the first step. You with me so far? If you're with me I got a thumbs up from Aaron. I was just looking for a slight nod. Thank you very much. So let's take this sentence. Let's take that phrase on the top of 92. We're going to use this one little peephole. This is our, the small end of the telescope. We got a little end, you got a big end. This is small. Stay with me, Debbie. You got the small end of the telescope here. We're going to look at step 1. First part, we're going to look at the 4-part. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick, give him an account of the struggles that made you stop, and show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of our spree. We're going to talk about looking at step 1 through those 4 pieces of the little piece on the top of page 92. And lo and behold, the big book once again rises to the occasion. Tell him how baffled you were. Look at the forward to the first edition. In the 4th edition, that's on page, I hope I got this right, XVI. Don't you love the Roman numerals? They make your brain work. What's XVI mean anyway? Let's see if I can find XVI. Here it is, XVI. Down at the, where are we here? Let's see. Middle of the page, once again. Now, this is talking about Bill W. He's 3.5 months sober, makes a business trip to Akron after trying to get all these drunks sober in New York by dragging them off bar stools and lecturing to them, trying to cram. He didn't even have a big book yet. He was just trying to cram his spiritual awakening down their throat. Guess what? Nobody got sober, but Bill did stay sober. And so in the middle of XVI, prior to his journey to Akron, the broker, that's Bill W., he'd worked with many alcoholics. And then further down in that chapter, the business venture had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear. He hadn't had a drink in 4 months now. But things didn't go his way. So his ego is suffering, his finances are suffering, he's been away from his wife for a few weeks, he's lonely, he doesn't have much money, he may be hungry. Oh my goodness, he may be hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. He may be suffering from halt. I'm assuming that here, it's possible. And what? He might start drinking again. That's just one example of dozens in the big book. that we can use to help tell our story of how baffled we were. Here's one little example from Bill's story. Look at the doctor's opinion. First sentence that made sense to me in the big book, XXVIII. They cannot differentiate the true from the false. I thought that was me the last 3 or 4 months I drank. The longer I'm without a drink, I realize I couldn't differentiate the true from the false by the time I was 7. And I didn't start drinking till I was 18. I've been having a little trouble with reality and my version of reality for a long time. Look at page 5 in Bill's story. Here's Bill starting to struggle. He's not struggling with drinking. He's struggling with the fact he can't stop drinking. Notice he goes from struggling with drinking and telling Lois it's going to be okay and trying to hold down jobs and do work. He goes from struggling with drinking to struggling with not being able to stop drinking. He says on page 5, where had been my high resolve? Jeff, he actually asked, was I crazy? Sharon M., you going to read for?
Yes,
Sharon.
I'm here. I'd love to read.
Go back to 178. You have a 4th edition?
Yep.
178, we're going to jump all the way back to Bob's story. In the middle of the page, as usual, in the middle of that paragraph, there is a sentence that begins, I was self-conscious. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Please read there to the end of the chapter.
Okay.
Or
Hi, guys.
End of the paragraph, end of the paragraph.
Okay. Sharon, I'm grateful alcoholic. I was self-conscious and ill at ease most of the time. My health was at the breaking point and I was thoroughly miserable. I sensed they had something I did not have from which I might readily profit. I learned that it was something of a spiritual nature, which did not appeal to me very much, but I thought it could do no harm. I gave the matter much time and study for the next 2.5 years, but I still got tight every night nevertheless. I read everything I could find and talked to everyone who I thought knew anything about it.
Thank you. If you want to write in the margin of your book, write, Bob is baffled. This is a great example. He's hanging around with people in the Oxford group, the people he's talking about. He went to the Oxford group with his wife in Akron for 2.5 years before he got sober. Bob is baffled. He's dying. He knows it. And he's hanging around with people that are doing better. He wants what they have. But he's baffled because he doesn't know how to get it. Dr. Bob is baffled, page 178. A few examples. You've got your own. Tell him how baffled you were. There's not a man or woman on this meeting that can't share that with a newcomer. Without embarrassment, without shame. And you say, well, I wasn't that bad. I wasn't as sick as Bob. I wasn't as sick as Bill. I'm definitely not as crazy as Bill H. in St. Louis. No, but you're crazy enough. You were baffled enough. Your story will resonate. Second one, how you finally learned that you were sick. Well, that's a long road for most of us, but look at the doctor's opinion, page XXX in the 4th edition. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. I drank for 21 years and said for 20 years and 6 months, I can quit anytime I want to, I just don't want to. It took me a while to realize part of my sickness, my illness, my ailment, my malady is the physical allergy. When I take the first drink, I have no choice. The craving is so overwhelming. I have to take the rest of those drinks. And then the judgment goes out the window and we do all kinds of other crazy stuff. Part of how I finally learned I was sick was to read the doctor's opinion and listen to other alcoholics talk about the physical allergy. Can't start drinking without developing the craving. Look at chapter 2. There is a solution. Page 21. Page 21. If you don't just listen to me, I mean, turn to page 21. This is a big book study. Come on now, everyone behave. Chop, chop. like I can make you people do anything. Come on. I know a lot better than that. Would you please turn to page 21? But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. She may, I'm going to transpose here, she may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of the alcoholic's drinking career, they begin to lose all control of their liquor consumption once they start to drink. Real alcoholic is not a promotion from alcoholic. Don't misread this paragraph to thinking that somehow we got a blue star. It's just the definition of alcoholic in the big book, which means we have the physical allergy, not just the mental obsession or the desire to fit in because she drinks martinis. I have to learn to drink martinis, even though I hate gin and vodka with or without olives. Page 23. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. Are you able to tell that to a newcomer that in your experience, if you were like me, you fought this fact tooth and nail? Oh, not me. I know better than that. No, I always knew I had a problem. You lie. The main problem, we may need some help here. This mind may not be able to think its way out of its own way. Think about that one. Look at page 25. With the help of this mind, moving from 21 to 23 to 20, notice even though this chapter is called There is a Solution, notice the progression of the problem as we move through. Yeah, downhill is right. Look at page 25. Come to believe. Here's a come to believe. This is the step 1 come to believe. I know we got come to believe in step 2. Here's the step 1, if you want to make that margin note. Here's the step 1 come to believe on page 25. Come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life, not as life in general. Look at the specificity, Luis. Life as we've been living it. Oh, there might be another way. I'm not going to consider another way until I realize my why is futile and hopeless. That did not sink in on me overnight. That did not sink on me when I got sober. It was a while before I was able to swallow page 25. But you can share it with the newcomer and let them start where they are. Baby steps, baby spoon, a little bit at a time. Now, Chris S., Abita Springs, are you awake?
Yes, I am.
Chris, one of our five favorite pages, page 30. Read the first 2 paragraphs, please.
Okay. Chris, alcoholic. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed.
My goodness. You may have to help a newcomer through that page a time or two, but it is the stark reality of the vital honesty of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous in action. No real alcoholic ever recovers control. He says later on that page, and just so we understand, chapter 3, more about alcoholism, is not really about people trying to stop drinking. The stories in chapter 3 are about people trying to control their drinking. See, that's more. In addition to the physical allergy that triggers the overwhelming craving, we are in this insane head-on collision between the reality of the physical allergy and the mental obsession. I can control it anyway. I can control it anyway. Takes a while to help a new person understand that. And the best way for me to understand it and remember it and not forget, well, I haven't had a drink in a long time. Maybe that's not true anymore. The best way for me to remember it is to help someone else try to understand it. Page 30 is powerful. And then look at page 31. Oh, we'll get there in a minute. We'll come back to 31. Utter inability to leave it alone, page 34. The desperate experiment of the first drink on page 35. Notice what he calls it, the desperate experiment of the first drink. There's no experiment after the first drink. It's inevitable after the first drink. Fred's story, page 42. Willpower and self-knowledge would not help. Keep in mind, we're going off that sentence in page 92, how you finally learned you were sick. If you need a real boost, look at page 151. You say, well, all the way to page 150? Yeah, it's not cheating. It's open book. The four horsemen are presented, in my view, sort of as a summary of the reality of step one, the mental, the emotional part. Look at the four horsemen, bottom half of page 151. What are the four horsemen, you say? Terror. I always think of this as the next morning again. You're not waking up, you're coming to. And you look around. You don't recognize the room, the bed, the person. Terror. And then bewilderment. How did I get here? Frustration. I did it again. And despair. Oh my God, I can't stop. The four horsemen summarize over 20 years of my life. And I don't mind trying to explain that to people, how they finally learned that I was sick. And then it says, give him an account of the struggles that made you stop. Kathy, you're up. Which Kathy was going to read?
Kathy, New Jersey.
Oh, that Kathy. Could you read the top paragraph on page 18, please?
Back to the beginning. Flipping.
You were moving around here a little bit.
I know. Here we go.
All right.
I am Kathy and I am an alcoholic. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it's an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list.
Thank you. This is one of the so-called, I call unmanageable paragraphs in the big book. We talk about step one. We admitted we were powerless, that our lives had become unmanageable. Here's what unmanageable looks like. Not just unmanageable for us, unmanageable in the lives of all these other people affected. And even though we deny it, there's a part of us that sees every bit of it. Those are some of the struggles that finally made me stop. Also, in More About Alcoholism on page 32, attempted to stop altogether. He could not. That was me many, many, many times. Page 35, became so violent when intoxicated. That was me. That's why I included page 35 in this handout. I was a really funny drunk for the first 3 or 4 drinks. After that, I became very, very mean and violent and destructive. And we agnostics, the paragraph on page 52 that are called the bedevilments, if you haven't read it lately, read the middle paragraph on page 52. That's kind of a parallel to page 18. Those 2 paragraphs alone help me understand unmanageable and help me help a newcomer, or maybe a not so newcomer, understand what we mean by an unmanageable life. And then finally, the last sentence we're looking at from page 92, show him the mental twist, which leads to the first drink of a spree. Well, once again, XXV, I, and the doctor's opinion. This was the first sentence that made sense to me. And it sounds so obvious today, but I remember the day it hit me. I was in Kansas City about 6 months sober and said, oh my! Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Ta-da! I'm still amazed at how amazed I was at that, but I was amazed. Look at Bill's story on page 5. The mental twist here precedes the first drink. Bill's story, page 5. Nevertheless, Bill says, I still thought I could control the situation. And then you read a little further on page 5. Loneliness and despair, self-pity, quicksand, all around. Talk about hopeless. Met my match, overwhelmed. Talk about powerless. Insidious insanity of that first drink. That's on page 8 in Bill's story. Cynthia, going to read for us on page 24. Cynthia.
Yes. Page what?
20 page 24, if you'd read the italicized paragraph beginning with the fact is.
The fact is, hi, I'm Cynthia, an alcoholic. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable, at certain times, to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
Dum, 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 dum. Dum, 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 dum. Thank you, Cynthia. I might have to read that with a newcomer more than once, but he put that in italics for a reason. And then, just in case that wasn't enough, look at page 31, the second page in chapter 3. I used to go to a meeting on Saturday morning in Omaha, and we read this every Saturday morning. We could all recite it, and we did, sort of like a epic medieval poem. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Look at page 31. I used to check in my mind, yep, I did that, yep, I did that, yep, I did that. Whiskey in my... I used to make fun of Jim's story where he poured whiskey in the milk on page 36 till I remembered eggnog. And then on page 41, Fred, who's just trying to have a couple, just trying to control it. Page 41, the thought came to mind. Notice where it came? Came to mind. The thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all. How many of us ever had a couple? No, you didn't, Debbie. We may have said we're going to just have a couple. We may have meant we were just going to, but guy says, I'd like a cold beer. So would I. I have no idea what that's like. I never had a cold anything except a Diet Coke. Anyway, I hope you can see from this there are countless examples you can use to relate to your particular first step story to sponsor, to help a newcomer begin to absorb the truth of step one for themselves about themselves. And it comes down to this in sponsorship, in step one. The objective, my purpose, your purpose as a sponsor in step one is to help the alcoholic raise their bottom. Help the alcoholic reach the point of seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Because until we are that desperate, we are not going to be willing to seek the spiritual help we need from a power greater than ourselves. That's why desperation, the gift of desperation, the GOD acronym in step one, is so important to even help them consider come to believe in step two. Step one is not trivial. Step one is not automatic, and it's definitely not easy for those of us who have been fighting this thing of control, because it's not so much about liquor. It's about the desire to control, the mental state that precedes the insidious insanity of the first drink. The objective of step one for the sponsor is help the alcoholic raise their bottom to become seemingly hopeless state of mind and body sooner than would be the case on their own, without the information in the big book, and without the shared experience, strength, and hope of the sponsor. Okay, Louise, I'm going to take about 7 or 8 more minutes. We'll wrap up about 10 after, okay? Because I've got an appendix 1 to the 3-page handout. There is a 4th printed page called appendix 1. I don't know, I may include appendix 1 in each of the steps going forward. Probably will. I call this sponsorship tips. See, we don't have to make this stuff up. We don't have to learn this on our own. These are sponsorship tips from Alcoholics Anonymous, the book, Chapter 7, Working with Others. And there happen to be 7 don'ts and 20 do's in this list. Most of the encouragement and suggestions and experience in Chapter 7 are do this, do this, do this, sprinkled through with a few don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. I am here to tell you, I've done every one of the don'ts many, many times, and I've learned the hard way. Don't do the don'ts. They're don'ts for a reason. And I've slowly learned to use and do the do's. So, beginning on page 89, they are very ill. Are you with me so far? No matter how good they look, no matter how hip, slick, and cool they sound walking in the meeting, if they're new, they're very ill. I don't mean that as a criticism, it's a diagnosis. So he says on the bottom of page 89, cooperate, never criticize. Did you see never? Oh man, never criticize a newcomer? No wonder we need God's help. But he does say to be helpful is our only aim. Page 90. Here's a don't. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. Also on page 90, glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. Here's another don't. Never force yourself upon him. I'll tell you more about that one next time, in my experience. Page 91. Here's some do's and don'ts. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. But the implied don't is don't make him. Dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you. Tell him some humorous stories on page 91. Show him the mental twist. We just talked about that on page 92. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. Begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. We talked about that, chapters 2 and 3. Page 92, be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. We're not here to accuse or indict. We're simply here to share and guide. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. And further down on 92, talk about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. That's huge. We can talk about hopelessness from firsthand experience and because we offer a way up and out from personal experience. Page 92, tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely and make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. Top of page 93. Outline the program of action explaining how you, why you. Look at page 94. He tells us how to go about a 12-step call. He says on 94, if your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding. Page 95, tell him if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help, but he should not be pushed or prodded. And notice this on page 95. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. Page 96, let him know you're available. If he wishes to make a decision, that would be step 3. And tell his story. That would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Page 97, look at this. This is flashing lights. This is in neon on page 97. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. That doesn't just mean sponsorship. That could just be helping in this meeting, sharing your experience, strength, and hope at 10 o'clock on Friday morning Central Time. Hint, hint. And then look at page 98. This is Bill being burn the idea into the consciousness of every person he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. Trust in God, steps 1 through 7. Clean house, 8 through 12. Another summary. Page 99 and 100. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent on his relationship with God. I'm not making this up. It's in the big book. Page 100, both you and the new person must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. Page 102, our job now is to be at the place where we can be of maximum helpfulness to others. And page 103, we are careful never to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. So, next time, step 2, and remember, as a sponsor, we're not here to make choices for the alcoholic. We're not here to take responsibility for the choices the alcoholic makes. We do try to help the alcoholic learn, accept, and apply the healthy information found in spiritual recovery in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous so they can make better, more informed choices for themselves. Thank you very much. Next time, step 2, become willing to believe in a power greater than ourselves. Thanks, Luis and Debbie and everyone else.
And thank you so much, Bill. Will you now close this part of the meeting with a prayer or reading of your choice?
Uh-oh. What happened? I don't know how I made you all go away for a minute. That's just uncanny. Page 164. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask God in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the person who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with God is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to God and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Choo, choo, choo. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you very much. Choo, choo, choo.
Now everyone can unmute and thank Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Bill.
So much,
Great
Bill.
workshop. Thank you, Bill.
Judges not sound bad.
Thanks, Bill.
What's your
Bill.
pie? What's your tie
Oh, the
like?
tie, yeah. Notice only one fish is smiling. The yellow fish is the sponsor. He's the only one that's smiling at this point at step 1.
Carpe diem.
Oh,
Brilliant.
We love you, Bill.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks for your humor, Bill.
What humor?
Or your character. Thanks for your character, Bill.